This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Abby Lucas.
We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of creativity.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
On each episode, we examine the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
We aren't. Find us online at artofdarkpod.com, and please support the show through Patreon or Substack. You get extra stuff. Thank you.
We're back with another dark room on the Art of Darkness. I'm Abby Lucas, here with my co-host Kevin Kautzman. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful summer day here in St. Paul, and I'm ready to meet your friends, meet our guests, and talk about the great science fiction genius Ursula K. Guin on this dark room. These are fun because we get to meet people. They're sort of half interview, half sort of repeat of the core episode, right? We don't try to redo the core episode, but we go back to one of the subjects we've covered. So I'm excited. It'll be fun.
Brilliant. So today we have with us Jay Luxembourg and Simon Muller. Jay is a playwright and an author writing YA fantasy, and Simon is an actor. And together they are hosting a YouTube channel called Dragons Plus Aliens, where they are discussing fantasy and sci-fi literature. Welcome to the show, both of you. Jay, do you want to tell us where the idea for your YouTube channel came from?
Well, it came because I've been doing a lot of reading in sci-fi and fantasy recently because of writing the YA fantasy book. And Simon is one of my oldest friends. We're in the same theatre company. And I just became aware through chatting to him that he knows tons and tons about really old books, like the really good classic fantasy, 20th century fantasy and sci-fi, including Ursula K. We started talking about it, and we realized that I know a lot about fantasy and sci-fi that's being published now, and I'm reading a lot. Sci-fi, and Simon knows a lot about old 20th century sci-fi and fantasy predominantly. Doesn't have that much time to read at the moment because he's got a young child, but loves talking about the old stuff. So the kind of format we have is that Simon is my guru and my teacher and explains stuff to me, and I tell him about stuff I'm enjoying reading at the moment. That's kind of how it works. Is that fair, Simon?
I'm not very comfortable with guru. But I mean, I suppose, yeah. I mean, I think that the idea,
Come on.
well, it's more, isn't it? But the idea was that actually, so my background is that before I went to drama school in London, I did a literature degree at Edinburgh University. I don't think I read a book that wasn't fantasy or science fiction until I was about 15, when I had to for school. And then when I went to university, obviously, I'm exposed to, huge amount of literature. And I think probably I was a little bit of a snob about what I used to read, and I put it to one side. I did my dissertation on fantasy and science fiction, actually. I did it on an author who was mentioned in the core episode. And I think, Kevin, you described him as having some trouble. I think it would be fair to say that Neil Gaiman is definitely having some trouble. That's what I did my dissertation on. And so you
didn't do your dissertation on the trouble, can we clarify?
I didn't. I did it on postmodernism, magic realism, and Neil Gaiman.
I see.
And then I think, in my 30s, I just started picking up books that I'd kind of remembered from my childhood, really, and then realized that some of them are really brilliantly written, like that. And some of them are really
for the people purely listening. What did you?
Sorry,
No, you're all right.
I just held up. Sorry, gosh. Can I just explain to your
YouTube? Right.
The context is that it's also 30 degrees in London, in houses without aircon. So we are.
Okay, I have to translate that for the peasants over here. 30 degrees. C to F.
90
It
something.
is 86 degrees. That's pretty hot in London. No AC, and they're going to be sweltering. So pretty hot. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I just held up my copy of the Earthsea Quartet,
Ah, there you are.
which is we're going to talk about. I know we're
I
going to talk later. So that's the context
Sure.
really. And then in terms of Jay, part of our kind of idea for the podcast is that all works of art are in conversation with each other. But
Hmm.
I think science fiction and fantasy tends to be in more intense conversational dialogue than other genres to a certain extent, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, but I would argue, and I think there's something you raised in the Ursula Le Guin episode, really. What is the difference between sci-fi and fantasy? And I would argue not very much, except that fantasy tends to be set in fictional worlds loosely based on the historical past of Earth, and fantasy and sci-fi tends to be set in imagined futures. And magic in sci-fi is magic and fantasy is replaced in sci-fi by technology, but magic and
Hmm.
technology form a very, very similar functions in allowing things to happen that don't normally happen. I don't know. So I'm always saying to people who read fantasy but don't read sci-fi, don't be scared of sci-fi because it's basically just fantasy in the future, and the magic is called an Ansible if you're reading Ursula Le Guin.
Sure.
I
Right.
I completely agree with this. In filmmaking, the last couple of films that I've made have been sort of a like soft sci-fi kind of Black Mirror type thing, but to me, they're magical realism. So I also think it's like a very similar sort of thing. It's just that the magic is science.
Yeah.
Mm. I do think, and this maybe ties into Ursula Le Guin. I'm sorry, Kevin. I know you're really good about saying the K, but I don't think I'm going to get around to
Oh,
saying K.
that's okay. Yeah. We listen, we've done a core episode on her. She's a friend of the pod. You can call her Ursula. Yeah.
It's fine. In fact, in the book I read when I was a kid, which I have one, they didn't even put the K in. Um,
Yeah.
so I never even, one of the things that I'm always saying to Simon, probably too much, is that I think that writing sci-fi or fantasy is one of the most exposing things that a writer can do,
Mm.
because if you're creating a world from scratch or a reality adjacent world, it's incredibly exposing about
Mm.
your beliefs, about your political beliefs, about your social beliefs, what have you chosen to put,
Mm.
what the political
Mm.
systems are, you know, how how you're dealing with race, queer people, all this kind of stuff. And most writers don't stand the test of time very
Mm.
well. I would say almost anything that was written maybe before 2015 is a bit dodgy, really.
Mm.
If
Mm.
you look at it with modern woke eyes. But Ursula Le Guin is one of the only writers who doesn't look dodgy. And that's quite
Mm.
extraordinary considering how long ago she was writing, 1969. I mean, I know she has had some critics, she's had feminist critics accusing The Left Hand of Darkness of being homophobic, and there are things that can be said, but generally she does stand up very, very well. And I was really, really interested in your core episode to hear about you talking about her parents' anthropological background, which I didn't know
Yeah.
at all.
Hmm.
I think obviously it's partly because she's a great thinker and a kick-ass feminist and all that good stuff, but also I think she just really has thought very, very deeply
Mm.
about the worlds that she builds more deeply than other people. Do you think, Simon, am I eulogizing too much,
No,
Simon?
I don't agree. I don't agree about everything pre 2015 not being very good. think that's, I think that's, and and I mean seriously,
No,
because you've got,
fair, fair.
well, you know, there's, there is. I think a lot of it is about the quality of the writing in genre fiction, and a lot
Mm.
of genre fiction isn't well written,
Yes.
and whatever that means, but
Mm.
I think we know what we're talking about. We're talking about prose that feels leaden. We're talking about characters that are undeveloped, and we're talking about things that are kind of like, if we're talking about fantasy, kind of sit in a weird kind of soup of sub Tolkien riffing, right?
Right, right. Yeah. It's
Um,
just garbage at the sentence level. There's no,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
All right, yeah.
Um, Whereas, of course, actually, Ursula K. Le Guin just writes brilliantly, but so
Yeah,
does William
beautifully.
Fritz, you know. And these books are interesting. And again, I was really taken by your discussion, Kevin, with Brad about her background and her history and her relationship to her parents and their jobs. And then I
Yes.
was so struck by the fact that Oppenheimer used to pop round for a cup of tea.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I mean, and for people who are maybe just, tapping in here and haven't listened to the core episode, please continue listening to this and then you can go listen to the core episode. But Ursula K. Le Guin was born in Berkeley to an academic family. So she did not emerge, whole cloth, off the farm. And her background, when you read about it, it really makes sense, that her work would take the shape that it did. So leading edge thinkers, very interesting childhood, and dealing with the sense of alienation herself, and also as a woman in sci-fi, just raging against I guess the status quo there, and sort of the old boys
Yeah.
club, I suppose.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
it's interesting.
100%. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Go on.
Well,
Even though arguably a woman invented sci-fi.
tell us more about
Which woman?
that.
Go on.
Oh,
Go on,
Shelley.
Abby.
Mary
Shelley,
Shelley.
yeah.
Oh yeah, of
Oh,
course.
no.
Yeah, the great another friend of the show, old Mary. Yeah. Oh
Old
gosh,
Mary.
my word, the Mary Shelley episode that I did, that was a revelation to me. I mean, just incredible story. Such unusual people. The background there is just wild. But in any case, maybe we'll go to Jay here. What was your first exposure to Ursula K. Le Guin? How did she come into your awareness, and what did
Oh,
she do to you as a reader and a writer?
I guess I read her Earthsea trilogy as it was then. I when I was a young child, so sort of pre-teen,
Sure.
when I was reading all the early stuff, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
Oh yeah.
and Lord of the Rings. I think Simon also read it quite young, and they're just the most extraordinary books. Maybe I'll just do a tiny thumbnail overview of them because you didn't really talk about them much in the previous episode, but they're set in a fictional archipelago kingdom called Earthsea, and they follow a wizard who's sometimes called Ged, sometimes called Sparrowhawk, um, through three adventures, and they all there's a very big focus in the world, as there is in much of Le Guin's work, on naming. The whole magic system is based on whether you can know something's true name and how you
Mm,
can control it if you know your name. And the really evil forces in this world, the dark ancient powers, are known as the Nameless Ones. And I know I've said this to Simon many times that I think that a fantasy book is only as strong as the antagonist. What is really good about the Earthsea world is that the antagonists, the nameless ones, are really scary.
okay.
Like in the first book, A Wizard of Earthsea, Ged slash Sparrowhawk, the protagonist, who's a school for wizards in the Central Island, has a rivalry with another young wizard, and in a sort of feat of showing off and a duel, he unleashes this creature, this shadow called, who's one of the nameless ones, who is really scary. It's like a weird bear with four legs but no heads, and it's really dark, and it grabs onto his face and rakes down and causes these great claw marks. And his
Mm,
master banishes it for him, but dies in the process. And then through this book, this nameless shadow beast like pursues Ged, like he's fleeing from it over the sea, and it hunts him and hunts him and hunts him. And it's properly scary as a child. And probably I would think as an adult, it's very scary. And then in the second book, The Tombs of Atuan, you move to a peripheral kingdom, which has got this 6-year-old girl called Tera, who is brought there as a priestess as a child and told she's the incarnation of the previous priestess, and she's forced to, as a very young child, to go down into this darkness of completely, utterly unlit labyrinths and find her way around them by touch and by memorizing turns. And the nameless ones live down there. And it's properly scary. She has to like kill some people who intrude by burying them alive down there, and it's terrifying. And then Ged turns up trying to fight the nameless ones, and you realize that he's on the side of good and she's on the side of darkness, and she has to rescue him. It's quite good. It's also a beautiful love story. So
Mm.
the nameless ones are really scary. This dark labyrinth you have to go down, people dying in the dark. And likewise, just to briefly finish the summary, in the third book, The Farthest Shore, this dark wizard arises, or a sort. He's not really even a powerful dark wizard. He's more a street conjurer, but who starts practicing necromancy and discovers how to open the gate between life and death, and starts drawing all the magic out of the world and stealing everyone's names, and nobody can cast spells or make music anymore because they're all being drawn into this rift. And Ged Sparrowhawk hunts him down to this island where this is happening. And there's this description of how Ged crosses the border between life and death through the gate that he's opened. And it's of this like just this hill in a twilight place that's sloping gradually down and down and down. And there's this small wall no higher than your knee that you might not even realize you've stepped over. You can do it really casually, but once you do, you're in the place of the dead. You can never get back. And it's scary. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
I'm wrapping up now, but I guess
No, it's
what I'm
great.
saying, images in these books are scary and the world is really gripping. And the
Mm.
idea of if you know something's true name is very, very powerful. I think they had similar effect on you, didn't they, Simon? Like you really liked them when you were much younger.
Well, I think that's interesting because I remember picking up A Wizard of Earthsea. I was probably about 9 or 10 from my library. I used to go to my library on a Friday because it was by my school. And I think by 9 or 10, I was quite precocious. So I was already kind of sniffing towards grown-up books that I shouldn't have been reading. You know, Stephen King, stuff like that, The Dark Tower. It's certainly out of the, I was a bit dismissive of, what you'd now call, young adult fantasy. And I really like lots of people who like fantasy. I like a map. I love a map in the front of the book.
Sure.
You know,
We love a good
because
map. Yeah.
I can sense that somebody's done the work, right? If you've got a map, you've done some world building, haven't you? And I loved, and for various,
Labyrinth
yeah,
going.
there we go. Beautiful
Sure.
map.
Sure.
Look at that.
Love it.
And what I really remember is being slightly disorientated by the book because it doesn't quite fulfill the expectation that you might have if you've been mainlining heroic fantasy since the age of, your dad read you Lord of the Rings when you were 5. Because the kind of confrontations in it are slightly off. There is a sense, I think, in that first book that the nameless thing that he releases is himself. So there's this
Yes,
kind of
because he
weird,
kills it at the end by naming
yeah,
it. Yes, that's how he
yeah.
destroys it.
So there's a weird kind of
Like a
psychoanalytic element
like a
to it.
doubling. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I did enjoy it, but I remember being slightly like, it doesn't quite sit where I expected it to sit. And then I remember picking up the Tombs of Atuan because that was there. And I remember being very disappointed because it wasn't about Ged.
Really? Did you? I love
Well,
that book so much. I must have read it
but
15
my
times.
point being that I was expecting it to be about Sparrowhawk and Ged, and of course it isn't because it's her story. And I
It's her
think
story, but then he turns up into it.
of
And
course,
there's that reversal that you get, which is so great. She's always doing these reversals that make you see things
yeah,
from the other point of view.
100%. And I think that's
You know,
really
and
powerful.
it's
And then
really powerful because
yeah,
it's
it
her
wasn't,
story, and you think she's the new person and she's the heroine. And then when Sparrowhawk turns up, you realize that she's the villain and
yeah,
she works for
well,
the villain's powers. And yeah,
yeah,
sort
villain.
of.
But you see, again, I think Ursula Le Guin would say that not that just the other. She's
The
the other.
other.
She's another version of the other, which I think is interesting. And then I went back and reread them in my 20s when I mean not quite my 20s, but there's a fourth book in this series called
Yeah. Well,
Tahani, and that
Tehanu.
Yeah, and that was published in 1990, so quite a big gap. So I would have been, yeah, I was about 15, 16. I don't think I read it then. I think I read it in the late 90s. And again, it's a really interesting book because it kind of confounds the expectation of how you're going to finish this series of books off. It is worth noting, I think, isn't it, about Earthsea, that Ged is not white, like he's not Caucasian.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that's a really, I think, a really important detail because I know that in terms of the adaptations that have been done, the two adaptations that were done, one in 2004 with Sam Neill, I think. It's awful.
Oh, really?
Oh dear.
It's
Yeah.
really poor, really poor. And
Yeah,
and
I heard she wasn't happy about the television adaptation of
yeah,
yeah.
because it's
yeah, because you get
whitewashing.
this
Yeah,
reversal here where you don't even realize that all the Hardic people who are the people of Earthsea are people of color. You
yeah,
don't
Mm.
realize until Ged turns up in Atuan in the second book, and
yeah,
Teyra is like, oh, he's got dark skin. Like
yeah,
for the whole first book, it isn't mentioned. I mean, I think it wouldn't be a big deal now, but I think in the 70s, when, there really was a presumption that the main character would be white unless otherwise stated,
Mm.
and you get it as well actually in The Left Hand of Darkness, where
yeah,
Genly
Yeah,
Eye
yeah,
he's
turns up
darker
and
than everybody.
after a bit,
Yeah.
everyone goes, are they all as dark-skinned as you, where you come
Mm.
from? And it's interesting because he's been presented as like this sort of classic, oh, human person visiting a planet of strange aliens and alien. Like, yeah. So she does those kind of reversals really well, I think. But Tehanu is a beautiful book as well. And what Tehanu does is idea of the wizard who get the Ged in defeating this wizard who's opened the door between life and death. He drains all his magic, so he has no magic left. He goes back to his home island of Gwent and um, finds Tera there, who he left there at the age of 15 after rescuing her from Atuan and not not getting together with her romantically, as was kind of expected, because the Tombs of Atuan is kind of a romance. But going off to pursue sorry, she's called Tenna. I keep amalgamating her name. She's called Tenna, and her real true name is Aha. But yeah, he gets together with Tenna and they do have a romance in their 40s, but he's completely drained of magic. But she is having had children and a husband on Gaunt, is now coming into her power as a mage and starting to practice magic. So it's interesting as well. I found it a really satisfying fourth
yeah.
part. Did you, Simon? I don't know.
Yeah, I felt like
I'm
it
loving this,
really.
by the way. I
Yeah,
haven't
me
thought about
too.
what we're doing in a minute. This is fun. What is the, sorry, and I'm sorry to talk over you, Simon. I just want to get what is the name? I feel like we got to promote your show one more time. What is the name of your show on YouTube? Where can people find that? And then can you pick that up, Simon? Maybe you tell us, Simon, please.
Dragons plus aliens.
Dragons plus aliens. So if dragons, if you need more than dragons plus aliens, okay,
You can
great.
add aliens. Yeah.
It's
Fun.
spelled
And I
out,
will ask
dragon
more. Yeah,
word. It's the word, and yeah.
love it. And plus, okay, Simon, please pick it up if you don't mind.
Great. No, I think it completely. It's really satisfying that somebody can go back to a really beloved series of books and it feels like it finishes, like it's finished. And it also, again, Kevin, I was so struck by in the original podcast that kind of sense of her at the end of her life, and you and Brad talked with great eloquence about her sense of aging,
Yeah.
and I think it's a sense with this book in 1990. She's in late middle age, that it
Mm.
feels like that she's bringing that perspective to the world that she created, which
Yeah.
feels, yeah, right. It feels like that's what a writer should do, really.
Really, and she of just real quick, she of all the subjects that we've covered, and we've covered quite a few, she sits among kind of maybe like the wisest. Like, and I know that whatever, she gives that off. Like, if you were having some sort of issue, of all the subjects that we've spoken about, I don't think Stanley Kubrick would be a big help. I think Marlon Brando would probably like put a cigarette out on you. I feel like Ursula K. Le Guin would be somebody you could take an issue to. I'm just going to read just a quote from her that I just picked up at random. I like to get, the voice of the subject in. And here's what she said about her influences. And the reason I bring this up following what you just said, Simon, is this idea of like, I love talking about writers and artists like this because it just validates my sense of the implicit worth of all of this stuff that we do that is so nerdy, and people who don't understand it think it's maybe a waste of time. But just think about the richness of this woman's mind and how incredible it must have been, inside that head. Anyway, here's what she said. Once I learned to read, I read everything. I read all the famous fantasies, Alice in Wonderland and Wind in the Willows and Kipling. I adored Kipling's Jungle Book. And then when I got older, I found Lord Dunsany. He opened up a whole new world, the world of pure fantasy, and Worm Ouroboros, say that 10 times fast, right? Again, pure fantasy, very, very fattening. And then my brother and I blundered into science fiction when I was 11 or 12, early Asimov, things like that. But that didn't have too much effect on me. It wasn't until I came back to science fiction and discovered Sturgeon and particularly Cordwainer Smith. I read the story Alpha, Ralpha, Boulevard, and it just made me go, wow, this stuff is so beautiful and so strange, and I want to do something like that. And this is a woman who could have done anything. She could have done like high literature. She really could. Her style was so strong if she had just written like New Yorker style stories about, I don't know, upper middle class academics, that would have gone well as well. Jay, I could see you have something you want to get in on.
Um, it's a really interesting quote, but I think you said somewhere else in that episode, you talked about her saying that she didn't originally conceive of her books as being sci-fi, and then she
Mm.
managed to get them published when she classified them as sci-fi. She originally saw
Right.
them as anthropological works. So I thought that was really interesting as well.
She said you have to pigeonhole yourself to get published.
Yeah, but also that she didn't really like sci-fi that much originally. Obviously she did from her early reading, but she didn't want to write sci-fi. But I think a lot of sci-fi writers want to write sci-fi and are really
Mm.
excited to be in that space. But she wasn't necessarily. She just, yeah. And
Well,
you can
sure. It's like a
kind of
ghetto.
say,
It really is. It's the genre ghetto. I mean, let's be
Mm.
realistic about the stigma that kind of comes along with it. It's sort of like neckbeards and conferences and you know what I mean? There's that kind of ugly side of it that's just sort of low status. And she did not come from a low status background.
Mm.
So it's an unusual kind of line she had to walk, but she was so muscular and strong in it that she pushed it in a direction where she just dragged the whole thing with her. And that is amazing. What a life. Yeah, Jay.
I think Simon was going to say something.
Well, I
Otherwise,
just
Yeah,
think
perfect.
I think it's because I think well, the first thing, of course, is that I think her position changes over time anyway, depending which day you got her. You know, how annoyed she was at not getting the literary recognition in the mainstream that she felt she deserved or not, which was a kind of reoccurring theme in the original pod. But I think because she's smart and so smart, so smart, I think she sees the distinction between fantasy and science fiction as a nonsense. Like she's just like, it's just, it's a nonsense. One, are you talking about one being like Asimov, hard sci-fi? Are you talking about on the other, there's my copy of Alfred Lord Dunstanay's King of Elfin's Daughter, which if you've never read, you
I
should read.
really want to read that. He's on my list of things to
Yeah,
read. Yeah.
brilliant, brilliant writer. There'd be no Stardust by Neil Gaiman without this book. So yeah, I think she views that these distinctions being a bit daft, really. And actually, I'm not sure she saw a distinction between her poetry and her fiction writing towards the end of her life either. I think they kind of
Yeah, well, she did. Yeah, it did all come together, and you talked about her experimental novel. I was really struck. I just read This Dispossessed, which I'd never read, in preparation for coming on.
Oh.
It's really good, obviously, but really, it's really a socio-political book, like very, very strongly. I mean, it's about a group of people who leave their planet because they're anarcho-syndicalists and move to the moon, which is uninhabited.
That
They go to the moon
rocks.
to up an alternate society. But effectively, it's not very much based on space travel. It could just be about some people who went off to found another country. But it's actually the first example of a book I've read that's in the utopian rather than the dystopian genre. And it really is in a very detailed way about whether anarcho-syndicalism works as a political system. Like it really is. That is kind of what it's about. This guy, Shevek, the main character, he's based very closely on Oppenheimer. And he's made some discoveries about the nature of time, which are quite revolutionary and that will in ultimately enable the invention of the Ansible, which is very important in all her Hainish Cycle sci-fi books. It's a device that allows you to simultaneously communicate with other planets, even if they're lots of light years away, like as if you're on the telephone. So it's very, very important. Um, and he can't really develop this properly in an anarcho-syndicalist society because he keeps getting sent off to work in the fields when there's a drought and there's a need for mutual aid. And then some people accuse him that his ideas about time don't fit with their ideology. So he ends up going back to the mother planet, which is an advanced capitalist society, very sexist, whereas sexual divisions have basically almost been eradicated on the moon. And then it doesn't obviously doesn't work out in the capitalist society either because they want to make money from his ideas. So he ends up starting an anarcho-socialist revolution on the mother planet and being rescued by the Terrans from Earth. But it really is basically, it really is about, is an anarchist society possible and what would it be like to live there? Um, so it kind of isn't sci-fi or fantasy, although there are tropes of it surrounding it. It kind of is a really hardcore, serious literary novel about
Mm.
what it would be like in an anarchist utopia, which,
Mm.
doesn't make me want to read it, honestly. I mean, it would make my father, who's really into Kropotkin and he owns Mutual Aid, he would want to read it. And probably me and Simon's friend Scott would want to read it. But like it would that wouldn't sell it to me, an anarchist utopia. Would you read that, Abby?
I mean, it doesn't sound like the top of my list, to be honest.
I was just struck, Jay, that I just there's a verbal tick we all do when we talk about literature, is that you actually use the phrase, it's not sci-fi or fantasy. It could almost be real literature.
Yeah, you're right.
It is real literature.
Oh, I know. That's what I mean. Yeah. Oh, dear. It's like you immediately are apologizing for the
You
I
words.
am
know,
apologizing for this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Simon. And I'm really sorry. And let's just shout out some writers.
Listen,
I mean,
we have a podcast. You know what I mean? You just go like, you do a party. It's just like, oh God. Yeah.
I think we should be done with putting all genres, literature, film in any kind of ghettos because, we all
Yeah.
know who Alfred Hitchcock is, but because of the genres that he was doing at the time, he wasn't up for an Oscar because it wasn't like a serious drama or, like, I mean, comedy would even come lower down the sort of awards list. But the people who won the awards in those years, do we even remember who they are? So,
Mm.
And
True.
there have been amazing writers like William. I mean, I think Ursula Guin is one who definitely is, should have won the Pulitzer even if she didn't. William Gibson, who is the most
Amazing.
extraordinarily speculative writer. And Simon's just given me this book
Mm.
for my birthday, and I've started reading it, but I haven't read it yet. It's Light by John Harrison, but it's
Mm.
extraordinarily well written. It's incredible, and this is definitely. Well, I'm not going to even make that distinction anymore, but it could
Mm.
definitely win the Booker or the Pulitzer or whatever. So,
Mm. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
It has come a long way for sure. I mean, Le Guin is one of the major kind of people who moved it in that direction. And that's not easy to do. I mean, especially as a woman. And yeah, she lived an incredible life. And she stayed mad too,
mm.
which I like about her. Yeah, Simon, I can see you have something.
No, I just thought again, I completely couldn't agree
did say
more.
married, and can I say this is maybe
Yeah, yeah, Jay, you're kind of cutting out just a tiny bit, but she was trying
am
to
I?
say something. Hang on. Okay, now we can hear you. Go. You're good.
I also just want to say that it's maybe not the image she would want to have of herself, but I would just say that she writes since you mentioned her marriage, she writes very good romance. Like, I really strongly recommend The Tombs of Atuan to anyone as a romance novel, as a standalone romance novel, and short as well. But it's
Hmm.
a really beautiful love story, and it really strong. So
Hmm.
yeah, that
Yeah, I
too.
mean, as I recall, she's one of the subjects that we've covered who had a happy marriage. Rare, rare among the artists, no doubt. So that's great. What is the quality of the romance that stands out as something why is that kind of surprising or, what makes it different? I
Oh,
see.
it's
I
just
see. Yeah.
well, I guess not maybe not surprising, but it's just really it's a really strong romance story
Hmm.
about, this girl who's brought up in a society without men, this evil
Hmm.
society where she's the priestess of the nameless ones and runs a
Oh,
really
geez.
creepy labyrinth. And
Yeah.
this young man breaks into the labyrinth to who's scared Sparrowhawk to steal an amulet, and she knows that she's supposed to kill him and shut him up, and
Hmm.
he's supposed to perish down there, and she kind of can't do it. She starts, watching him in the labyrinth. She's never seen a young man before, and she ends up saving him, and they run away together. It's a very classic story. I can't quite think what the name of the story is, but it's just really beautifully done, very
Yeah.
powerfully done. It's lovely.
Yeah,
But
well, just real quick, I mean, all the work as you're describing it, and I'm sure we touched on this in the core episode, it has that feeling of, ancient folkloric
Hmm.
material, but then it's given, her embellishments and her spin. It's these like primal stories, and of course, the daughter of anthropologists. So here we are. Yeah, Simon.
which is that I think she writes, what is really interesting is that, I guess there may have been a decision early on with Earthsea to write a male protagonist that is going to sell. And she
Mm,
writes, Geds, if you were to remove the name of the writer from the book, I would have thought you would think it was a male writer because she
mm,
really sings Get Into Life. And then I think in the Tombs of Atuan, she sings into this other young woman. And I think that's one of her great gifts is
Yeah,
actually,
tenor. I keep saying her name wrong, but she's called tenor, like a tenor
yeah,
singer. Yeah.
which
sure.
is, again, what I didn't come to the Left Hand of Darkness till pretty much maybe 15 years ago, maybe 10, 15. So that was quite late for me to that particular party. And again, because Abby, you've just finished reading it, right?
I have. I did not come to it until this week.
I mean, I don't know what you
Oh,
thought.
that is a washout as a romance novel. It's terrible. Like, they don't have sex.
They don't.
Terrible.
No, they have a love, but not that type of love. I mean, I had not heard of Ursula K. Guin before, but when Kevin had invited me to co-host the podcast, my housemate was going through the list of the previous people that Out of Darkness had covered and was super excited that Ursula K. Le Guin was one of the subjects. And so she got out her stack of novels because she's read them all and gave them to me. And I had only had time to read The Left Hand of Darkness, but as Kevin had said in the core episode, when there was an interview with her, and she said that she made the protagonist a male because any like female coming to the planet would just go, well, this is paradise. Like, why is everywhere else not like this? I also was like, sign me up. Like I think our permanent state of Cameroon is perverse. We should all live on the planet where we have like 5 days a month and that's it. Like the idea that all of these people would just take other people for who they are, and that's why we like them or don't like them, and a society where that's all taken away was just like what an amazing thing to
Well,
explore.
hang on. So people who don't know what cammering is, you just bring them up to speed, right?
Right.
It's like being David Bowie, kind of. Yeah, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
love that. It's like being David Bowie. That's the best.
Yeah. But it's like don't they change that? Well, Abby, you just read it, so describe it if you
Yeah,
want.
so they on the planet they're sort of an androgynous society, and 3/4 of the month they take on a they're sort of like they were described as he's all the way throughout
They are
the
technically
storytelling.
hermaphrodites. They're hermaphrodite
Yeah.
beings with
Hmm.
both male and
Um
female female potentially sexual organs.
Yeah, and their sex organs are kind of contained on the inside, and then when they go into chemorine, which is kind of like a state of heat, they can morph into either male or female bodies.
Sure.
And you know, they find a mate, or they have some mates that are they're loyal to. They could be vowed to one another,
Mm.
and anybody could be the party that could get pregnant if conception is achieved, and that person would stay in that chemid state, I guess, until they'd finished lactating, until they'd stopped like breastfeeding the child, and then they would go back to their hermaphrodite state. And there's like houses that you can go to sort of like fulfill your sexual desires and things like that, but after that you don't have them when you go back into the rest of the cycle. And the number of days is sort of similar to like the human menstrual cycle. And then if you're a being that is in a permanent state of chemorine, you're known as a pervert.
Oh, you're just way too horny on Maine for
Yeah.
society. Yeah, I know a few people. Our show's lawyer is that guy. He's made a whole brand out of it. In any case, that was a very good description. And as you describe it, and Jay, I see you. As you describe it, I mean, it's like, how far out is that? Like, it's so even now. You're
Yeah.
like, wow. And I don't know if she has a map of that, but I feel like I need a map of Kemmering. Like, funny. Yeah,
The
Jay.
chemorine cycle.
The Kemmering cycle. Yeah.
Stefan describes it in detail. There is a whole chapter on it, but it's really interesting. I mean, she did come under a lot of criticism from feminists for choosing to use he pronouns for the hermaphrodite beings, the Athenians. But I think it's a really appropriate choice, because what it is really is that the Genli A, who's the narrator, who's a normal human, a pervert with male sexual
Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
organs. Um, he can't really understand them. He doesn't really understand them, and he can't really relate to gender them from his need to see them as male or as female, and that he can't see their hermaphroditeness. And therefore, there are a lot of social nuances and nuances of communication that he can't make because he's constantly gendering. So a lot of it is about these very sort of subtle anthropological and political as well, because there are two warring states on this planet.
Mm.
These misunderstandings that occur politically and socially because of his male need to gender these beings who are genderless. So he's sort of constantly thinking, oh, he's a good fellow. We could go on a trek together. Oh, he's being a bit effeminate. Don't quite like that. Don't quite feel comfortable with that. Is he a
Yeah.
woman? No, no, we're having a lovely drink together. And he's sort of constantly oscillating and really uncomfortable. So it's really revelatory, but also quite subtle from that perspective. I think it's an extremely subtle book, and a lot of it is him just not understanding what's going on about him. And what I mean, there's some extraordinary passages there in it though, like the one where he goes to see the people who have the power of seeing the future. That's extraordinary, isn't it, Abby? That scene where
Yeah.
they're dancing and beating, and you can ask them a question, and they
They've got a whole collection of different types of people that are not quite necessary. There's like politics going on between all of them. They're kind of they're just a weird collection of people, and yeah, that was a really powerful scene.
yeah, the
Sort
zany.
of has a Macbethish witches type quality to it, but different.
Crazy. They've got one pervert there who's perpetually in camera, who's bringing his sexual energy. They've got two people called zanies, and it's an actual method of seeing the future, which works. So there are all these communication things, and then they're also added into that. You've got the fact that Genli A, the envoy, the normal human who's visiting the planet, has telepathic powers which he can't use because the cathedral and normally communicates using what he calls mind speak, empathy, but can't do that because the Cathenians, the hermaphrodite natives, haven't evolved that. So it's a lot. It's very much. I mean, Look, and I love the way that you brought up in the previous episode that Orwell essay, Politics in the English Language, and talked about how she uses language. She's constantly doing these reversals of perspective. And you get that in The Left Hand of Darkness as well, where having been in the perspective of Genli A, the envoy, the whole way through, right at the end, you move into narration from the first person point of view of Estraven,
Yeah.
the Gathenian hermaphrodite love interest, slash friend. And even the title, the left hand of darkness, which means the light, light is the left hand of darkness, and the left hand of darkness is the light. It's those reversals, those perspective shifts she's always doing. And you quoted that passage as well from the beginning of The Dispossessed in your long episode, where it opens with the image of the wall and says, how you see a wall depends on what side of it you are. The other, whatever is on the other side of the wall is
Yes,
the
it's
thing being
yeah, it's
enclosed.
very yeah, it's really runs, in contrast to sort of that heroes and capes and swords and good versus evil, and she's just, really focusing on sort of moral ambiguity, perspective, outsiders looking in. Isn't that the Left Hand of Darkness where he's always cold because their planet is
Yeah.
just that much colder? Yeah, as a Minnesotan, I find that really fun. That's cool.
When they trek
But
across the ice as well, there were like these beautiful images in all her book. And
Mm.
again, this is quite romantic. Basically, he gets taken prisoner. Estravan, the hermaphrodite Gathenian love interest, rescues him at great personal risk. And they then escape by trekking, like Captain Scott style, across the ice, and they may die. They're sharing a tent for like 80 days, only one bed, Abby, and
Yep.
nothing happens. My husband goes into coma. I'm still quite upset about this. I'm sorry about the spoilers, listeners.
You might
Spoilers
have
for Left
worked
Hand of
out that
Darkness.
Jay's trying to, not trying to, is writing some kind of romance elements in her own right at the moment. So, there's
Perfect. Yeah,
a
you're
wish
getting
fulfillment happening.
Investigating the
sure,
romance.
sure. She
I
writes.
wouldn't
She's
have
a
my
drama.
characters in tent for 80 days with nothing happening. I feel that's just
It,
mean to the reader personally, but
it's
Um,
worth just picking up actually that I've got the edition that I've got of The Left Hand of Darkness is has got an introductory note, which is the introduction to the 40th anniversary edition, in which she addresses a load of these questions, and she talks
Mm.
quite a lot about, she made some revisions to the text. She kind of then threw the revisions away, and that there are different versions of the novel with uh, use of language around gender that shift. And I just thought this phrase, this kind of opening paragraph is really interesting, which is if the phrase gender construction had been invented in 1968 when I wrote the novel, I hadn't heard it. Feminism was being reborn, but my own feminist education, which began with Virginia Woolf, was still plodding along behind the advance guard. I was always a feminist, but always a slow learner. And I think that's a brilliant way of holding the kind of controversy around it. And I think there's not a lot of controversy, let's be honest, not really. This is not a book that people are going, it's not like the satanic verses. We're going, oh my God,
well, it's
and done.
controversial. Well, it is now banned.
But
Can I just say though, it is now banned in Florida. Nearly all books are banned in Florida,
yeah,
but
of
The
course.
Left Hand of
Oh,
Darkness is
wow.
banned in Florida.
And again, to anybody, it's incredibly radical. But I think it's also interesting she mentions Virginia Woolf, because I would suggest, or my feelings about Ursula K. Le Guin are that she's in many respects a postmodernist writer. If you take the definition of modernism being that modernism is epistemological, like it's interested in ways of how you know things, like how do you know things, how do you represent knowledge,
Mhm.
and that on a very, very broad level, postmodernism is about ontological questions. So, like, what are the ways of being in the world? Like, from the insular to the bigger perspective. And I think one of her great gifts is going like, how could we live? How could we live now? How can we be better at living now?
Mm.
And I think that's really
Yeah.
powerful.
It is, and I think what she's doing is she's using the standard, arguably quite patriarchal tropes of sci-fi. Or well, no, they're not patriarchal tropes, but it's sort of born as a male-led genre, and she's taking the tropes, time travel, alternate worlds, alternate realities, and using them as metaphors to explore how women are socially constructed. And by the end of the 1960s, critical theory was in full flow, and people were looking at sci-fi as a kind of artificial megatext of shared conventions and intertextuality. And I think she's one of those feminist writers in that period, in the late 60s, early 70s. I mean, Doris Lessing and Octavia Butler also one of them. Doris Lessing wrote some great sci-fi books, but those feminist writers who are taking those metatextual elements and recomposing them and redirecting them. So they're still sci-fi books with planets and time travel and alternate universes, but they're reconstructing social what would have been seen as norms at the time.
Right. I mean, and if you just step away and describe this sort of freaky gender bending aliens who go into heat, and like you could zoom out and it almost sounds like, pornographic. Or you could imagine it, and under a different writer's work, the cover could look a certain way, but it's very elevated, and she's using the medium to do the thing that it can uniquely do, which is these sort of grand thought experiments where you take an idea and you just stretch it as far as you possibly can, and challenge the reader and surprise the reader and make the reader reflect back on the artificiality, the construction that we inhabit. Yeah, it's life. Life goes so fast, and we have no time to just pause. So many people, and she came from that academic background where that's their business. Their business is these big ideas and everything. So she's ready to do it. And yeah, what a gift she had to just. Yep, go on.
No, I mean she does. She definitely does that. She less pornographic. You could not have 80 days in a tent. Nothing happened. Right.
Wow,
This has upset you, Jay.
Jay, you have to write some. Yeah.
When I first read it as a teenager, because I was really invested in a love story. It's a beautiful love story, and then they have this they do manage to communicate telepathically. And
Hold on.
Yes.
Aphrodite. Here's Genle speak in the voice of his dead lover, and it's really romantic.
You're saying you wanted a love story, but what I'm hearing is that you wanted sex. That's
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, we can have a whole different podcast about either sex or romance.
Yeah, that's a different show. We'll save that for the After Dark, and just for people who are listening. The After Dark is for patrons. It's patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. Please support the pod if you like episodes like this. We can bring you, fun guests like our friends here who could talk about Ursula K. Le Guin and sci-fi for another 5 hours, I'm sure. Dragons plus Aliens, Fantasy Sci-Fi Booktube, and you can find them on YouTube.
Shut us up.
Yeah. Well, I'll do it. It's at Dragons plus Aliens. I mean, you can't. It's plus spelled out, in the URL, and that's youtube.com/at Dragons plus Aliens. I want to give you both a little time to pitch your other work, like what are you working on, and if you can tie it back into Le Guin, great. Not mandatory, but for the After Dark, we are going to talk a little bit about her Dao De Jing translation, just to sort of keep us anchored in something. But again, I think it'll probably just end up being another 30 minutes of Le Guin talk. We're going to start the After Dark again, as we're doing all year with the Year of Lynch. I'm just gonna randomly read a quote from Catching the Big Fish, because we're not going to forget David Lynch this year. No. And then Abby and I next year are going to do the episode on him, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So maybe Simon, and then we'll go to you, Jay. Simon, what is are you writing too? What do you have in addition to the show that you do?
Well, it's interesting. People often wonder if I write, and I have to say, no, I don't.
Oh, thank God. Thank God. Finally, somebody, that's such a relief. I can't wait to be done. I can't wait to be retired. Anyway, go.
I'm quite good at doing other people's words because I'm an actor. I also direct. I mean, Jay and I've worked as an actor for 25 years, and I've done kind of film, television, but I've done a lot of theatre, and I I met Jay working with a theatre company in the UK called The Factory, who are, I suppose, a kind of an experimental theatre company about how you how do you stay live? How do you when you've rehearsed it and you've learnt the lines and it's
Mm.
all artificial? How do you stay live? And I also work with a company called Live Canon quite a lot, and we are going to Toronto to do an agit-prop musical about climate change and fiscal law on the
Wow.
yeah, on the stock exchange in November. I don't know if they
Fun.
know we're doing that. I don't know if I've just blown our cover by announcing.
Well, that sounds a little niche. I think you might be all right. I mean, just don't announce any crime on the podcast. I would
Yeah,
strongly recommend against that.
yeah. I'm
Uh,
sure we're not breaking into the stock exchange. I think we're going to walk in the front door. I think we've been
Listen,
invited.
I've lived in North America most of my life, and I'm pretty sure Toronto isn't a real place. So I don't know. I think it'd be okay. Yeah, that sounds great. That's fascinating. Yeah, cool. Um, awesome. What about you, Jay? You're the writer. You're
I'm
guilty.
a writer. Can I just say
Yeah.
that Simon was in a fantastic production of Sherlock Holmes in Oxford last month,
Oh.
created. It's an extraordinary Dr. Watson. So, as we're talking about genre fiction, he was very good in that. Um, yeah, I'm a writer. I'm working at the moment on a middle grade fantasy novel.
Hmm.
Which middle grade as in it's the protagonists are 13 when it starts out, so they're young teens with serious potential, so they have the potential to get older. It's kind of a historical fantasy crossover, so it's set during the Wars of the Roses in medieval Wales. One of the characters is a very young Henry VII, 13-year-old Henry VII. And the main character is called Lots and the Changeling in the way that, middle grade novels tend to have that format of name, Lots and the Changeling. And it's about a girl called Lots, Charlotte, who discovers that she is a fairy who was swapped in her cradle for a human child when at birth.
Hmm.
It was sort of come about because there were lots and lots of stories about fairies stealing human babies and putting
Yeah. Yep.
leaving a fairy baby in their place, particularly in the medieval period when people were actually quite scared of those things, pre-17th century witches, people were actually genuinely scared of fairies. They didn't have that Victorian image of them as being diminutive and having wings. They were like quite witch-like,
They're sort of like
if there
earth
was
spirits. They were sort of, yeah, right.
like if there was plague in the village or all your cows were dying, you'd think you'd angered the fairies, things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and
Your
these fairies
your
was one
brother
of the
starts a podcast.
things
Fairies.
exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things they thought was that the fairies took stole human babies and left fairy children in their
Yes,
place.
the
But
changeling. Yeah, yeah.
I just sort of wanted to know what happened to the fairies. What should the stories never tell? And yeah, so that's kind of the premise. But
Cool.
it's
Fun.
it's kind of a 13-year-old friendship adventure thing.
Yeah,
Not
that's
published
cool.
yet or anything. I'm working on it.
That's the emotional level that I remain at. So, I the prose may be a little easy, but emotionally I'm sure I can relate to it. Well, how do you find well, how calculated are you when you take on kind of a YA project like that? Are you very, very specific about the language you're using? Are you just doing it kind of intuitively, or have you, I mean, you seem very studied, like you know what you're talking about. So I guess how kind of paint by numbers are you in terms of like these are the rules of this, YA type?
Well, I don't know. Well, like I say, it's technically middle grade, so it's for a young audience. And what I'm trying to do is it's written in the first person. What I'm trying to do is use the language of contemporary teenagers,
Uh,
to narrate a medieval story. So to
mm,
Hmm.
not use elevated historical language and not to romanticize knights and castles, but just to try and make it about real teenagers in that situation. I don't
uh-huh.
know.
Yeah. He got that Riz
Uh,
for real, for real. That fairy Riz.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how what the kids say anymore. Um, This has been great, and and we're going to talk
Yeah,
more on. Oh
exactly.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
pretty much
Jay.
that's pretty much
Yeah,
my opening line, Kevin.
I love it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Cool. Yeah,
No, I was
somebody
just
could
saying
explain
that
what
was my
race is to
opening
me.
line. How did you?
Yeah, good. I know. Well, I have the Ansible and telepathy. So yeah, I just and the there are a few more things I want to talk about on the After Dark. This has been a lot of fun. I love when we have guests come on who are so knowledgeable and passionate, and the dark room episode can just kind of take its own shape. Abby, thank you for bringing your friends on here one more
You're welcome.
time. It's Dragons plus Aliens, Dragons plus Aliens, in case you need both. And it sounds like you do. And we're going to come back on the After Dark for patrons, patreon.com/art of dark pod. Please support the show. Here it is. You take it or leave it. And but on that, we're going to do the Lynch business. We're going to talk about her translation of the Tao Te Ching, which I think will be a nice little curveball. And then I want to talk more about this idea of naming as power and the true name as power, and whether or not we believe that's real. Like, is that real or is that fiction? Because I increasingly I'm getting to believe we live in a world that's far stranger than the nightly news would suggest. Abby, do you have any closing words before we take a break?
No, nothing other than I am looking forward to hearing more about your naming thoughts now.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing yours. I'm going to put you on the spot. Please, everyone, try not to go into Kemmering during the break. Thank you. We'll be back. Simon J.
Love that. The great ever.
Yes, we'll be back.